Well, today I want to welcome Trey Rogers from STL. Welcome, Trey.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, today we want to just, again, I'm doing a series right now, just talking about, doing a focus on a company and their operations and how, the president of the company, CEO is taking care of things in the company, how it's seen growth, where it's been seeing some growth phases and where they've seen some things that they've had to, some challenges throughout their career. So Trey, for the audience out here, tell us a little about yourself and about STL.
Yeah, no problem. Again, thanks for having me, Mike. I think STL, for those that don't know us, we kind of brand ourselves in the market as STL family of companies. And really what it means is we have two primary companies that most of our clients and people in the communities know us. And that will be STL Staffing, where we supply people and different expertise for special projects on contingent labor staff, or more strategically, anything from, C-level down to, needing a week's project. And then there's the other company. We have our outsourced IT division where we run as a traditional managed service provider. So MSP is a term that people are commonly, beginning to understand and know what it's about. So anything from strategic IT planning and complete outsourced, CIO type services and security services, down to just, simple project migrations, and kind of running the whole gamut. And so those are the two primary companies that my responsibilities over. And I know STL, we kind of have about 4 to 5 different companies, but those are the two kind of main branded ones that are our revenue generators here at STL.
Okay. So how is that over the years? I mean, and it's been established a long time ago by the owners of the company. And the owners' names are
Tim Norman and Katie Norman.
okay. And they basically they started this 1991?
Yeah. Yep. It's been over 30
1991.
years. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean it's been around. So how's it as you've been involved as the president of the company and then working with the owners of the company who originated this, how has it evolved over that time from 91 to now? I mean, we're in 2024, we're flying through 2024. How's it evolved over the time and what have you seen?
Yeah, it's actually a cool and interesting story. And so the founders, Tim Norman, he kind of had a vision, a dream, like most entrepreneurs, to own an IT company one day. And he was working at State Farm in tape control and IT, which in many ways is kind of the mailroom, right? It's where a lot of individuals went to get started in their careers. And Tim, moved kind of up through the ranks, and he was in development, and he was working on a project. And as he was working on an IT company on the side, just kind of as a little side hustle, it got to the point where he had gained enough clientele that he thought, I have a decision to make to really dig in and go after his dream. And so when he kind of took that to State Farm and said, hey, look, I would like to, leave essentially in the middle of my project, but I think I have found somebody, that can come in and take my spot. And I'll, over the next 4 to 6 weeks, I can train them. State Farm essentially, long story short, evolved that into, hey, can you find us more people that know the expertise of the projects that we may be running? And so the staffing firm, Michael, actually started on accident, which is actually kind of cool. It was used as kind of a proxy to get Tim out of the day-to-day commitments that he had in his career at State Farm and keeping them in a reputable spot with the project, and moving himself out. And as they continued to reach out to him over time, early 2000s, I believe the business, about 90% of the total revenue was State Farm. And so you have this business that started to try to start the IT side, and the staffing side kind of blew up on accident. And that was kind of the evolution of the two businesses. And we can obviously talk to kind of where they've gone today.
Well, it's interesting. It's always fun to hear where it started, what the idea was, how it came out of something, and it's changed over time. And I think that's what I've seen over the years of the companies I've worked with, companies I've started, is like you start with this one idea, or you think this is the idea, and you realize that over time it's evolving into something else or something more than what it is. So how is that, since now that you've been the president of the company, you were in operations before with the group, how has that shown, being in the operations side and moving into the president's role? How has that affected just as you continue to move forward with the vision of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started in 2015, I started as an intern. And so We are at this moment still a family business operated company. And so Tim and Katie are my in-laws. And so I married their daughter, Nicole, and it was kind of a funny story, but I was going to Illinois State studying computer systems. I meet Nicole through a mutual relationship. And as I start talking to Tim, I think the first time I met him, you kind of talk about the entrepreneurs and the crazy things they do to be successful. The first time meeting somebody that's dating his daughter in college typically is pretty intimidating. And I think after 30 minutes, he had offered me a job at the company. And, looking back at it, you look at kind of how risky and how maybe irresponsible that kind of seems. I started working at STL as a junior developer. We were just kind of changing systems and we were moving data around. And as the company started seeing a little bit of growth and some clientele, it was time for me to have the opportunity to go full time. And so Tim and myself, we sat down and we had that business conversation. It's kind of, what's your vision for the future, both, with my daughter, but also, the business component is certainly a pathway to understand how we can continue growing this thing. And so my mentality, Michael, in that really shifted towards, I just, over the last 4 years, went to school to do something technology related. And I had to kind of unwind because it became very quickly, or I found out very quickly that the vision for the company was really to grow. And, my thought process and working with my father-in-law at that time, who wasn't my father-in-law, was, okay, in order to grow the business, I probably can find where we can work with smarter individuals than myself that can be good engineers. We need to develop an operational and scalable engine here to get this thing off the ground. And so over the last 10 years, my relationship with the company has been, account management to sales management to project management, operations management, director of operations, COO, and then president. And it's all happened from a form of intentionality through just natural growth and scale and just kind of figuring it out as we've grown the business.
So I assume as you're talking all the different areas that you touched and started with, just from the very beginning of coming in and doing some simple things, but then learning, understanding the vision and doing more, getting further into operations. And as the president, how is that? I mean, I look at that as similar to what some things I have when I started off a long time ago, starting companies or working for people, is you learn some of the simple things, how a business runs, all the different things, components of it. Do you feel like that's been so valuable to you to start at a place where you learn all the components? So then now as you are the president, you have the vision, you're now executing that with the family, with the owners, with everybody that's there, everyone's kind of going the same direction. Do you see that, how that was important to you and to the group?
Yeah, it absolutely was. And I know we'll kind of talk about vision and frameworks, but I guess my personal style, Michael, is that it probably just kind of the IT component of my brain is I like models and frameworks. And, really when we sit down is, these things have already been created and invented, and I'm a big reader. And so, when I sit down with Tim and just the business, we're looking, there's really four main stages of a business, whether it's operated well or poorly. It's you kind of start out, and you have that dependent operation where, the owner or the entrepreneur is kind of working through a lot of things themselves. And then we said, okay, what can we do to kind of get this to a more stable, independent operation where you're starting to implement small scale management, right? We had 1 to 5 to 10 different tasks that we knew that we needed to operate within to get to a fully independent operation. So we were not depending upon Tim for anything other than maybe cash management and high level relationships. And as you start looking through that, and it's still true today, the next phase, and these are in all parts of the organization, is, okay, how do we generate organic scale? So we went from dependent to independent. Now we need organic scale where we have repeatable growth, and not just in revenues or clients, but in processes. How can we get each individual small scale management to repeatedly grow their processes and evolve over time? And then the last one, which is mostly the part that I operate in now, is kind of the last two, the organic scale and the strategic. And this is the fun part of the business. This is managing and running the frameworks and the models for how we're growing the business. But it's things like acquisition, it's new go-to-market strategies, locations, et cetera. And so those are the things, Michael, to answer your question, when you kind of go back and look at the things that have helped us or myself be successful, it's you break everything down to just even an area in the business. Are we dependent upon one to two things? Are we independently operating now that we can manage it effectively? Are we organically growing it, and strategically, where's this going to be in the next 1 to 3 years? We just try to look through everything through that lens, and things get a lot simpler in terms of just following a framework.
Yeah. No, I think it's important. Like you said, I'm a avid reader, love to read about what the process is and understanding how people have done it, and also too is just learning. So taking that and implementing it into your own company or companies that we've all been involved in. And it's interesting to see, as I've watched STL over the last so many years, I've been aware of it since I've been in this community for a long time, is how it's evolved and how you can see there's been a shift. I've noticed a shift in the last so many years, where there's a difference. I don't know what that difference is yet. It's been fun to watch. I've noticed as you're growing, I noticed you have multiple locations. So what made you decide? Was those strategic locations? Because you were mentioning a second ago about, growing and being different locations. I've noticed you're in several places throughout the Midwest. What were the reasons from that? Is that just a strategic or acquisition type thing?
Yeah, a little bit of both. And so one of the things, early 2000s, before my time, State Farm, just like as many of the large corporations do, they were kind of positioning themselves to nationalize, in many ways globalize some of their contracting vendors. They were just trying to vertically integrate some of their efficiencies and trying to scale up simpler. And one of the things that they did is they were just cutting the bottom half, 2/3 of the contracting vendors, and like I said, integrating those with more global and national partners. And at the time, STL was not that. Mm-hmm. And so Tim, the founder, the president at the time, he needed to diversify the business in a weeks time, months time. And what he actually did was go out and bought a staffing firm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And so it was very kind of intentional in the sense, but it wasn't also the most strategic, if you would, just because he was kind of forced to do that. The strategy behind Appleton and now Green Bay and just what I would say the Northwest or Northeast Wisconsin region has turned into a strategic driver for us, where we want to continue being in that area in Milwaukee and growing out. And then I would say on the IT side, locations. I think with just what we do and kind of the way that business is evolving, and then just the unfortunate businesses practices that have kind of taken place since COVID, which is organizations realizing that they can work remotely, and regional focus is not such a pressured move now. It's allowed our IT company to focus more into a target market that's more Midwest and national based. And so there is some strategy behind it, as we've seen some organic scale and some acquisitions. But a lot of the start of it was just getting it to diversify the business kind of from a forced hand from what State Farm was at the time.
So a lot of it sounds like some of it has been because you have a situation, you're trying to accommodate what is out there. So if it's State Farm or someone else, you're saying, okay, we gotta have this staffing group. We're gonna buy a staffing group so we can continue to funnel staff to different places. And it's just so you're adapting to what has happened. And as you mentioned, COVID is we're all adapted to the way business is done, the way staffing's done, which is interesting. As you mentioned, it's like before it was like everyone had to be in an office. Now it's like, well, not necessarily, which then also I assume has made your ability to then recruit other people that are not necessarily in that one area in Appleton or wherever it's at that you're at. It's like, okay, we can go a little bit further out as a national thing and find even more possibilities for companies and for yourself as you grow. So how did you, with that, as you're growing, as you're looking at that, and as of course COVID, you had mentioned, and I've seen some of some of the stuff you put out there on LinkedIn, you're talking about EOS and how that has been effective to you and how you've enjoyed that. And I've noticed a lot of people have been really digging into that recently. How has that helped your operations, and why did it help your operations?
Yeah, absolutely. EOS has been huge. I know for those that aren't very familiar with it, or those that have just kind of dabbled in reading the books, at the surface level, not to take anything away from EOS, but take all of the orange entrepreneurial system and kind of all that aside, at the end of the day, EOS, the nuts and bolts it's a model and a framework that allows the company to just structure themselves where we can scale our people. And, what we always talk about, Michael, is that, humans, just like you and I, we get tired, we get inefficient. Systems and frameworks don't. And so, when you're kind of talking about scaling myself in different parts of the organization, as a young individual, a young professional, it used to be kind of a badge of honor is I do everything around here. And then you realize when the focus of the vision of this growth, you need to kind of establish in the organization repeatable processes or frameworks for communicating your vision, solving issues, evaluating people and processes. And you realize that winning in business becomes more about putting a vision out into the universe and then letting your people kind of come up with what we need to do to get to that and make it, a fruition. And so, I always say and remind our people, we don't rise up to the level of our goals. If you gave me a month, Michael, to go run a marathon, I'd probably be in rough shape. But we fall to the level of our daily standards. If I'm training for that daily, there's a pretty good shot there. And so humans get tired of inefficient system and inefficient systems don't. And that's what EOS has allowed us to do. It's just allow us to model the business in a way that's helps communicate a vision so that the people that we hire with our values can say, okay, team, this is what we need to do in each of our departments to funnel up to our company goals and live that out.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you're talking about efficiencies, framework, of course, you talked about earlier in the beginning, it's like you love framework, just because that's where your mind works. So it's I always love structure. I love having framework put together. But again, you like, okay, here's the framework, but how do we execute it? How do we do these things? And I think that's, as you're talking through that, it's like the execution. I was like, okay, great. We have this framework. We follow these things. We get the people doing the things that need to be doing, the right seats, all the different things. But also, too, we have to make sure each of those people are being taken care of and they're able to do their job, and the efficiency is great. And as something I've been looking at and reading recently is like what we've really come to in this new world of, COVID and all this other thing, way people work is efficiency versus resiliency. It's like, okay, we have this efficiency idea. It's like we can be more efficient, but also too, we have to be resilient because we have things that come up that stress a company. And it's like, how do you have the people to be resilient? Do you have the ability to move people around or things around in order to do that? And that sometimes it's not an efficiency thing. It's just more of, can you get through this moment? And it's like, you guys definitely have gotten through the awful pandemic and reevaluate how you do things, restructure things, change your framework. I mean, your framework probably changed a little bit, but not a ton, but it's just, again, reassessing it. So what do you see in the future for STL and yourself as you look at the future, looking at things, besides having efficiency and things like that? What are some of the things that you guys are excited about and looking forward to?
Yeah, I would say just from a high level business perspective, it's continuing to look at those different scale models that I talked about. We've been kind of living in between the organic and strategic scale components of what we've developed for our business. And we've made a couple acquisitions, some that are kind of tuck-ins, some that we think provide us, a different platform to be able to dive into a new go-to-market strategy. And I think the biggest thing at the end of the day, Michael, is just making sure now it's, on my shoulders that, we consult with about 500 organizations between the two companies. And what I've observed personally is the number one easiest thing for a business at any size, scale, trajectory to miss the mark on, including ourselves, is as a business grows, the scalability component of it, there's really kind of three main things. And the first two are very obvious. It's how do you scale your revenues? How do you scale your client base? And the third piece, getting to your question, is the organizational scale almost is an afterthought. And that's what EOS kind of helps with. But as your org chart gets more vertical, the pace kind of picks up. And I read a book that kind of put a lot of this in perspective. It's Reid Hoffman's Blitz Scaling, and their book kind of talks about how high growth companies operate with scale, speed over efficiency. And obviously that's it, for different types of businesses that want to sell out quickly. And that's not our mode at the moment. But the thing that's interesting about that is what's next, what's in the future is, I think no matter what is next and in the future with our go-to-market strategy is just making sure that we have an organization that can support any type of growth and or strategic driver that we want to dive into. And I think the reason for that is when you kind of dive into what that looks like, when you go from 4 to 6 employees, your team in that department may only have grown by 50%.
Mhm.
It's still a small team, but for a relationship of a manager or a COO or a president to manage that, those relationships just grew by 150%.
Yeah.
And so the vision, all of your repeatable processes, it just, 2x'd the speed of which everything operates. And so the organizational piece really gets strained. And that's where you can kind of accidentally create a house of cards where you prioritize, speed over efficiency. And so I think the biggest thing for STL as we kind of look into getting into new markets and just continue to expand our total addressable market on both sides of our business is just making sure that the organization is structured in a way that it can not only get into the areas we want to be in, but also sustain it. So it's not just kind of a flash in the pan as we continue to try to spread our wings a little bit.
That's good. I mean, as you talk about, we talked about scalability a lot today. Is some of the things I've been trying to let people know, or as people come to me and ask me about how do we scale, what do we do? We want to acquire these companies, we want to grow to this number, and it's like, okay, great, let's look at this. How do we, the expense part of it is always a big key factor when I tell people. It's like, you can expand, you can acquire another group, and you have to first understand all that. And that's another topic on a different day, is like, when you look at another company, how you decide if you want to acquire them or not, other than saying, okay, they have some resources as well, but there's other things that come with it. There's debt, there's all these other things. So as we look at this, and as we're kind of closing up here, it's like, love to have you back on again, just to talk to you about how as you've looked at other groups, and as your strategy of growth and what that means by saying, okay, we're going to grow by this X amount. How do we keep expense in check? Is an interesting topic that I think some companies don't look at. And it looks like you guys are always looking at everything, looking at the full picture of everything, what's going on. But it's like, we want to do this, and this, but then we know these things are going to be the things that are going to possibly be problematic. So yeah, we could, like I said, we could go all day here. But no, I want to say thank you again. I appreciate your time. This was very informative. Looking forward to catching up with you a little bit later down the line to say, how's things going? What have you noticed? As we know, as our economy, as everything goes up and down, as relationships, as staffing, it's a constant moving target. What people are asking people to do, and it's interesting how a company stays focused and driven, and staying with that vision, and knowing that, hey, we'll have to move, change a little bit, but we're not altering course too harshly in order to stay successful. So, Trey, thank you for your time, and appreciate you coming on and talking with me.
Yeah, no, thanks again, Michael. I'm looking forward to doing it again and digging into the weeds even more. So thanks.
Yes, thanks.